Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, here today with Byron Lambert to discuss some mock draft simulations he has done using version 2.1 of our epic, magical, mythical cheat sheet for PPR leagues, now available at RosterWatch.com. Have some of that to do. We're going to run a mock draft. We're also going to talk about the new busts and monsters scoring distribution tools I put up for the wide receiver and the running back positions. Byron, you've been doing a ton of simulations. What the hell's going on, brother?
Man, just staying on task. Got a little bit of the rainy season, beginning of hurricane season moving in here, a little keeping it cool, but leaving me indoors a little bit more right now. So just staying busy and making sure that we're on top of our mock draft simulations, on top of all of our draft products and our draft cheat sheet, so that, just like every year, we are ready to make hay every step of the process here. So, Alex, for me, I mean, we go way back in terms of designing the cheat sheet and running mock draft simulations every year. I mean, we've been doing this for a decade now. And one thing that's always stood out to me in the process of testing and retesting is to really be aware of testing for the extremes and testing for the wild swings. And oftentimes where that occurs is at the turn on the tail ends of your drafts. And, you never want to overreact to the outcome from, any single simulation. And you got to be careful to overcorrect things at one extreme of the draft, because it can really affect the other.
Fucks up the rate. Yeah.
So you have to be kind of modest in your moves. But in the end, I mean, that, if you're in a 12-team lead, the 1-2 pick, the 11-12 pick, I mean, the 3 pick, the 10 pick, all of a sudden that's 4 to 6 picks. I mean, that's a large percentage of the league who's drafting, ultimately drafting from one of those positions. And we want to make sure that we are in good shape no matter where we're drafting from. So I was enjoying just testing from the turn recently, just draft simulations. And so there was one particular draft from the 12 spot that stood out to me a little bit here. I know you've been discussing recently all the additional inputs that have been been flooding into Fantasy Pros and their simulator right now. It's, all various rankings and ADPs are, there's a quite expansive list now that's being included. So
why don't we do a simulation from one of those spots?
All right. Well, let's
before we get started, just using 2.1 to see what you think. And like you said, man, like now we've gotten even more of the pre-draft rankings in here. We have all the different average draft positions from ESPN, Fantrax, RT Sports, Fantasy Football Calculator, the composite best ball stuff, of course, the expert consensus at Fantasy Pros, and then the pre-draft rankings, basically how players are listed in the queue for all your opponents who don't know as much as you do to just pick from. So that's what I've noticed. Whenever those get incorporated, that's the biggest thing that we need to account for. But version 2.1, I believe, test 2 here. Let's test this sheet in this one draft in a 12-team PPR league, a snake draft. What draft position do you want? First, second, third, 10th, 11th, 12th, if we're talking the turn? What do you think?
Well, maybe go from early, because I'm going to talk about 12. So let's see what happens at 1 or 2. I
did 1 with Trashman the other day, so let's do 2. Okay. With the roster positions, do you want 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, or 3 wide receiver, 1 flex? You generally like 2-2, whereas Trashman always prefers 3-1.
Well, I just think that there's a reason that Trashman is not the quality control or the architect of any of this. Because,
okay, it's 2-2.
We test for all of those, but more generally speaking, you need to be ready for all.
My favorite way to test is 2-2.
Yeah, it's more flexible. It's more representative.
Okay, so I'm going to use 2.1 test 2. Let's just go ahead and start the mock draft here, and we'll see what we end up with. Thanks again, as always, to Fantasy Pros, man. This definitely helpful every year to get to run these simulations using all these different inputs they pull in. plus the machine learning of the actual draft wizard, which is just awesome. All right, so Saquon Barkley here with the first pick. Let's see. What we're hoping for is a well-balanced, well-put-together team. We'll see if we can put it together. This is going to be weird, though, Byron. This is going to be weird from the very start. Something's happened that I just never expect to happen. And that is George Kittel. You and I generally don't like taking tight ends here. I'm hoping that this draft doesn't end up going completely sideways. And no, we didn't get Kittel. Oh, I meant to pick Kittel there. Did I not take him? All right, so we'll get Mike Evans.
Picks of the season.
What?
One of Trashman's safest picks of the year, the 2020 season, George Kittle.
Yeah. Oh well, let's just go with this. Mike Evans, Odell Beckham. Looks like this draft is already going to be feeling like it goes pretty sideways. Unless this, I'm just hoping that the sheet pulls us through here. As usual, it usually does. Let's see, DK Metcalf. The settings on this have been set up. What are the? Oh, shit! I've been using the wrong cheat sheet. No wonder this is going so bad. Let me start this over, Byron. I'm sorry about that. NFL Draft Wizard. Start a mock draft. So all these settings are still the same. 2.1 test 2. Then when I start it, okay. So I go from suggested players to top rank. Huh. Are you seeing this server error that I'm getting on Fantasy Pros?
I was just drafting manually off the cheat sheet for my test purposes, so I wasn't seeing that error. But I also was running these simulations.
This is weird. It's just like the mock's not happening. It looks like something's probably going on here at Fantasy Pros because it pulled in the wrong cheat sheet at first, and now it's telling me that there's a server error and it can't run the simulation. So let's just forget about the simulation. Our apologies for that. That's what happens live on YouTube. I'm just trying. Maybe towards the end, maybe we'll try another simulation at the very end and see how it goes. But yeah, it's still giving me a server error. So, all right, your thoughts? Sorry about that.
Live look at how the sausage is made.
Yeah,
right.
It's tilting. Yeah.
Bringing these people, basically bringing the folks right into our daily lives. This is the motions you go through. So yeah. So anyways, Alex, I was testing for the extremes, testing for the wild swings, which often occur at the tail ends of your draft, which, basically the turns in your drafts, either like the 1-2 spot, the 11-12 spot. So there was one particular draft that stuck out to me that I simulated from the 12 spot last night, Alex, that I wanted to talk about today. And look, invariably, every year we talk about the wild shift in ADPs that occurs over the course of the summer. And, the first bit of that always begins when the flood of these rankings and ECRs start to come into the system, into the marketplace. And then the next big change that we'll see, probably the most important change we'll see in ADPs, will be once mock drafting and real drafting begin in earnest, July into August. Then the ADPs, people start coming to reality with their decisions. The ADPs take another big shift at that point. So I think with this last flood of data, Alex, we've seen maybe some pretty significant changes here, which is not unusual this time of year, and it creates some really fun talking points. So, and the shift right now, so much of it is due to just this happens every year. It's just it's basically an economic thing within the market and the industry. And what I've what I've kind of deduced here from this run that I did is that there is some upward economic pressure right now from this latest data that's coming in on the running backs in rounds 2, 3, and 4, Alex. And specifically when it related to the results of this draft, I went from the 12 spot, and it came out pretty wide receiver heavy early. I was a little bit thin at running back. So my draft basically went Kenyon Drake, Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp to begin. And just to give you a sense for my roster in its entirety, I ended up with Kenyon Drake, Darius Geis, and Keyshawn Vaughn at my running back position. Obviously, all guys that we like, but certainly guys with question marks. And then I was absolutely stacked at wide receiver from the 12 spot. Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp, DJ Chark, Mike Williams. And then things rounded out very nicely at quarterback and tight end with Matt Ryan and Jared Cook. My sense was, though, leaving this draft with it being pretty tilted towards the wide receiver position early, is that ultimately probably going to have to look to reconcile, even artificially, even though the value in our minds in a vacuum doesn't necessarily corroborate. These are the upward pressures of the market at the moment. There's going to have to be some running backs that are probably reconciled in the round 2 through 4 range, or, in that Tyreek Hill through Cooper Kupp range. Because, once you get into the Terry McLaurins and the DJ Charks that I was able to get through the rest of this draft, you realize that there's still just so much quality wide receiver value. So the way I tried to look at this, Alex, was who were the running backs I passed on for Tyreek Hill early in this draft? I passed on Miles Sanders, Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Todd Gurley, and Melvin Gordon. And, and again, in a vacuum, we probably like Tyreek Hill more than those guys, but with the way the drafts are beginning to go with these new inputs, it is putting upward pressure on some of those running backs going a lot earlier than I anticipated. When I got on to rounds 3 and 4, and I was following the sheet, and I was induced to take, or instructed to take, Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp at the round 3-4 turn.
That's probably so. Hold on. Are you telling me in this draft, at the 3-4 turn, you were instructed to take Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp, and you're telling me that the Gurley and Fournette were Gurley especially was off the board at that point?
Yes.
And Fournette too?
Yep.
Okay.
So, and obviously it's a killer wide receiver start. Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp.
Well, I have never had one go like that.
It's because of this. It's because of this. Things are changing rapidly with this latest influx. And again, you don't ever want to overreact. But I was here to talk about extremes today, and we have to hedge against this. And I think it's also this has been a late flood of data that's come in, and you got to things change rapidly at this point. When that happens, and they will readjust back. Over the course of time. But for those who are simulating now, this is kind of what I'm seeing. And again, this is kind of just perceived economics that's forcing real economic pressure to occur in the fantasy market, in the mock draft market among ADPs.
Well, I get it, but like the simulate. So I was dying to get the Draft Wizard on Fantasy Pros back working, and I just did run a simulation from the same spot, same everything with the actual cheat sheet. And this was a lot better. And if anything, I think it looks a little bit thin at the wide receiver position. This team is Daniel Jones and Matthew Stafford at quarterback, running back Saquon Barkley, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell, Cam Akers, Darius Geis, wide receivers Devontae Parker, Tyler Boyd, Emmanuel Sanders, and Preston Williams and Brandon Ayuk. And then tight ends of George Kittle and Jared Cook. To me, that's a pretty awesome team. I might like it better if I didn't have to take George Kittle that early, and I could have just gotten a better wide receiver one than Devontae Parker. But it's how the draft fell in that one. So it's just interesting to look at that. So to me, it's unbelievably frustrating that you ended up using 2.1 in a PPR 12-team snake draft that landed you those 3 shitty running backs. It's like, that shouldn't be how it works at all.
Well,
I've
why
never
I wanted
seen
to talk about extremes. I mean, I think what it is it signifies where maybe these running back ADPs are headed a little bit right now. Again, guys that we don't love the value on, but it's just kind of the structure of the market at this point. So just something to stay on top of, maybe a trend to watch out for. I'm glad we're talking about it today. So then when I was instructed at that round 3-4 turn to take Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp, I looked back and
let's just talk about that 3-4 turn. Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp. Are they in a different league to you than Odell Beckham? Because Mike Evans is in a different league than those guys. But are Odell Beckham and DJ Moore in the same bucket where you'd say, man, at that point in the draft, I feel like I'd want one of these running backs instead? Because if that's the case, I think I need to make a small structural change here to the sheet. Let me just see. So I'm going to insert 4 rows below. And then I could move down, just say like, all right, once you get past Mike Evans, right, you have a Mike Evans, Austin Eckler decision. At that point in time, there shouldn't be a decision between guys like Miles Sanders, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, and Todd Gurley, maybe even Melvin Gordon or Le'Veon. No, you need to leave the decision there starting at Gurley, I think. But with Odell Beckham, DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp.
Well, if we're going to talk about those guys as a group, I think that's a good group together. I think it's fitting. I think you can make an argument that those guys live in the same neighborhood. But again, it's kind of respective in terms of at least the outcome of this one draft. What did that do with respect to the running back market? And so it's a group of guys here that I don't necessarily love, but these were the running backs that I could have taken instead of Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp. I could have taken Chris Carson. I could have taken Jonathan Taylor, who I saw went way earlier in this draft than we'd been seeing. He moved into a 4th round. These were all guys that went after Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp in my draft. But had I wanted to balance my roster a little bit more here early because of the value that I got on guys like Chark, McLaurin, even Mike Williams later, this is seemingly this would have been the spot to reconcile this. I'm not saying this is how all drafts are coming out, but this is, I thought, was a good talking point. This was an extreme that occurred at the turn. And, I think these are the kind of the entails of things that we still always want to look out for, hedge against, and sometimes represent trends, especially with the recent flood of data, because this surprised me too, Alex. So the guys I would have had to take over Amari Cooper or Cooper Kupp had I wanted to try to get a handle on my running back situation at the 3-4 turn, I would have had to consider Chris Carson. I would have had to consider Jonathan Taylor. I would have had to consider Le'Veon Bell. David Johnson went very early.
Who was your first pick?
Kenyon Drake.
Was your pick in the first round? At the turn.
Kenyon.
So it was Drake, Tyreek.
Kenyon Drake, Tyreek Hill.
Okay.
And I get to round 3 and 4 at the turn, late 3, first pick of the 4th round. And the sheet instructs me to go back-to-back Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp. And look, on paper in a PPR, I love starting with Kenyon Drake, Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, and Cooper Kupp. So there's something beautiful about that, especially when I get Matt Ryan and Jared Cook later to fill out. I mean, I can live with this roster and make a lot of hay on it. And it did end up somewhat on top heavy when it came to wide receivers. And when you're going to see that I still had the option to take Chark, McLaurin, Mike Williams here in the upcoming rounds by the sheet, it makes sense that I would have, if I was going to reconstruct what I would have did, maybe I should have taken a Le'Veon Bell over an Amari Cooper.
Okay. So what I did was the sheet has been restructured in that portion. And of course I have to test this before I update it. But what I've done is I've made a tier that ends after the Chris Godwin, Mike Evans area. And it instructs you to go running back until you get down to that Fournette sort of Gurley area, to where Miles Sanders and Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, all those guys would be available to you through there. Eckler, Sanders, Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette. And then if you were instructed to take an Amari Cooper or a Cooper Kupp, you would then have the decision to go with a Melvin Gordon or a Le'Veon Bell if available.
Yeah, I think getting Le'Veon Bell an exit ramp, an option there, it probably greatly helps alleviate the situation. Again, things I learned.
What about Chris Carson though?
Well, that's the tough one. I mean, we've come down on him a little bit, but the market says yes. And I mean, in general, we've kind of had him attached at the hip with Le'Veon at this point. So I get how in a vacuum we feel better about Cooper Kupp and Amari Cooper at this point, but from a roster construction perspective and from the current marketplace, it makes sense that Chris Carson's kind of right in the pocket there. I mean, I get a little goosier about Jonathan Taylor and David Johnson, who went right there with Bell and Carson. I think that's the beginning of a trend of seeing those guys potentially start to go earlier than we would have thought, something to watch out for. I'm probably maybe not quite as comfortable with either of them. I think maybe that's a separate group for itself, but so maybe you have that Carson Bell option there. And
so Chris Carson needs
the flexibility you need.
Well, it's just so fucked up because it's like we've talked before about how the Allen Robinson, Adam Thielen, AJ Brown, Juju, Golladay, Devontae Parker, like all those guys, the Calvin Ridleys, the Tyler Lockett's, the Robert Woodses, these are guys where through this vein of the sheet that were at first. After your first set of simulations, you said we need to clear out that portion of the sheet to where we're taking wide receiver there. Now we're saying that it's not necessarily.
I think that's right. That's where we want to fill up, because what I'm about to tell you next is that the next turn, the sheet instructed me to take DJ Chark and Terry McLaurin because guys like David Johnson, Jonathan Taylor, Devin Singletary, Raheem Mostert, James Conner, and even David Montgomery were all off the board. So I ended up in a situation where I go Drake to begin in the next.
Did you not even get Cam Akers in this draft?
Cam Akers was, let me see here. I did not, because I think he was below Chark and McLaurin on the sheet. I'd have to go back and look, but it was close, but I'm pretty sure Chark and McLaurin were on the sheet.
He's one spot ahead of McLaurin. Yeah, he's okay. Okay. Well, man, I'm getting Akers in like 82% of these.
Yeah, well, that's another great talking point because it's interesting. I mean, I think he's a guy that we're seeing the market and the industry cool on in general. I know the Trashman's tapped the brakes a little bit on him. I like him. I see where you're going with that. But that's part of the reason, why I don't mind going for that main vein of wide receivers there too, Alex. And once I get like the Charks and the McLaurins, because I think that's great wide receiver value compared to the Kareem Hunts and the DeAndre Swifts and the Ronald Jones, the Kerryon Johnsons, and maybe even the Cam Akers with a little bit of downward pressure of the world. I mean, I don't want Cam Akers to be my RB2. Truthfully, and that's what would have happened even if that was the case. It just doesn't reconciling those guys doesn't solve the problem. You're gonna have. It
would have gotten you closer to the minimum of 5 running backs that I've tried to make sure happens over these first 14 picks. I mean, I've tried to. I can't believe this simulation. That's a shitty simulation, or that's a shitty mock. Like that's
a lot of good players, just a lot of good players, but definitely ended up kind of unbalanced. And, this is something that we want to hedge against. It's not fun for us to talk about. I mean, but it's early in the season. This is when we're tweaking things. This stuff happens. And this is why we have the subscribers and the followers we do, because we work on this every day of the year. And so as soon as something like this crops up, we're on top of any incoming data or any trends that may be shifting in the marketplace. And again, this is not necessarily indicative of exactly what's going on, but I do think it represents potentially where some trends are headed. And there are some people that if they had a draft in earnest, there's a chance that they could have a little bit of an interesting run at the turn, just based on what we're seeing here with this, what seems to be upward pressure on running backs in round 3 and 4 is what I witnessed in this draft from the 12 spot. So, yeah, I mean, I just think, and then I ended up with Mike Williams later. I told you I still got Jared Cook and Matt Ryan in the midst of all this, which I loved. And so I just think you look at it and you say, getting Tyreek is great. getting Amari and Cooper Kupp are great, but I love having the value on the DJ Charks, the Terry McLaurins a little bit later. And so it forces you to almost artificially think about, do I want a Miles Sanders over a Tyreek Hill? Do I want a Le'Veon Bell maybe over Amari Cooper or a Cooper Kupp? So that's like what the main fallout from that test was. And then I had a few other thoughts here as well that
all right. Well, look, man, I mean, here's the thing. Where was it most important that you should have addressed running back? Was it at the 3-4 turn? Because I think we can hedge that, but
or possibly over
because
Tyreek
with the
Hill.
1-2 turn, that's what I'm asking. Which is more important?
I mean, ultimately I think it's going to be around that 3-4 turn where it's got to be addressed. But if there's a way to get a Miles Sanders up, by a Tyreek Hill, I think, or pulling a Tyreek Hill and that group of wide receivers down a little bit, he might consider it. But I think ultimately it's going to probably be in the meat of rounds 2, 3, and 4, where a running back has to almost artificially.
Was Josh Jacobs off the board
right now? Yep.
At the 1-2 turn.
As a matter of fact, I mean, well, that's another guy I wanted to talk about. I mean, that's something I know. I listened to you and Trashman's podcast the other day. I was cracking up about it. Actually, it was a really entertaining one. But I mean, something personally I will still be reconciling on the standard and half point PPR sheet is Josh Jacobs over Kenyon Drake. I mean, to me, that's just, I get the argument, but that's something I'm going to take care of on the other sheet. And Jacobs went before Drake in this particular draft, so that's why he was not available there.
And Chubb wasn't available. Was Chubb available?
Chubb was below Tyreek Hill on the sheet.
Well, right, but was he? I'm trying to figure. I would like the information. Was he available?
He may have been. I was following.
So you would have. So, but Jesus Christ. Okay. So it's just wait. So if we're at the turn and you had a choice between Nick Chubb and Tyreek Hill, that goes to pick 2.02. Then we're automatically okay. So here's what needs to happen. I think we need to switch Austin Eckler and Clyde Edwards-Helaire right here. In a vacuum, do you like Miles Sanders better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, if I'm thinking about who I'm taking over potentially,
even with all this Boston Scott stuff, you're not them looking at other running backs to bring in, them saying that they want more and more of a committee.
It's a tough call. It's that's what I'm saying. The economic pressure forces you to do something you're not even really that comfortable with. But this is where you got to be opportunistic. And so if we can't address it here, you got to consider addressing it maybe in rounds 3 and 4. You don't want to put too much artificial pressure where you're not value-based drafting anymore. But
would you take Nick Chubb or Tyreek Hill? Haven't taken a running back first.
I'd probably take Nick Chubb.
Would you take Austin Eckler or Julio Jones?
It's a close call.
Okay, Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Chris Godwin? Or Travis Kelce?
I'd probably take Edwards-Helaire or Kelce there.
Miles Sanders, Mike Evans, or George Kittle? Here's what happens.
That's a good tier.
Here's what happens. Just let me look and see. Where's Miles Sanders' ADP right now compared to Clyde Edwards-Helaire? This is how I can figure this out.
In this particular draft, he went a few running backs before. It went Miles Sanders, Austin Eckler.
Okay,
Aaron
let's just
Jones.
see. So PPR, consensus ADP, we have Miles Sanders ahead of Clyde. So here's how we fix this. Here's how this gets fixed. I've got it, Byron. I've solved the fucking riddle for now until it needs to be solved again. But here's what we do. We separate wide. If I do a screen share, can you see the screen share, Byron?
I saw it a second ago when you had it up.
Okay, I'm just gonna do a quick screen share here of the cheat sheet, and I know we're not supposed to do this, but I can just show it real quick. So what we'll do here is, you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Taking these guys, we're saying if you get to Tyreek Hill, we're going to have you take Josh Jacobs, or you can choose between Nick Chubb if he's there, right? Tyreek Hill and Julio Jones feel like they're in a little bit of a different category than Godwin and Evans, right? So we stick Miles Sanders right between there because his ADP is 2 spots ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So if a Clyde Edwards-Helaire falls here, you can choose between – oh, and I need to move back down both these tight ends. If Clyde Edwards-Helaire falls here.
You starting to think maybe Mike Evans belongs over Godwin with all the talk about the 12 personnel? And I mean, there's a lot of talk right now about Chris Godwin taking a hit this year for reasons that make sense.
I get it, but I think Mike Evans too. I think Mike Evans takes a hit because what we're depending on from him with Tom Brady's arm these days, aren't we depending mostly on him for touchdowns? And if Rob Gronkowski stays healthy, that could be a swindle for him.
Yeah, the big question is if Brady can push the ball down the field to Mike Evans is that type of big X target that he used to be able to capitalize on, back in the Randy Moss days, et cetera.
So if you got down to this Amari Cooper Cup range like you got in the 3rd round or in the 3-4 turn, you'd have the option to go with Melvin Gordon or Le'Veon Bell. Yeah, I'm not. I've moved up Carson, Jonathan Taylor, and David Johnson to around here in this area, just because it feels like Allen Robinson, Thielen, and Galladay are just such awesome picks right there. You think these guys need to be in consideration?
I think you're going to have. I don't necessarily believe that, but the market is going to force you to do that. So
all right, well, I'll put it like this.
You're going to end up having to do that.
I'll put it like this, and I'll just test it like this, and we'll see. I'm not sure it's going to work, but I think
that's pretty good. I mean, the other small tweak is maybe getting Bell to where Cooper is, but that's a small move if you don't want to make that big move.
Getting Bell to where Amari is.
Yeah, not necessarily at the expense of Gordon. I don't even know how that would be possible. Maybe you'd be pulling Amari and Cooper Kupp down a little bit. I like what you just did. Test it like that and maybe go from there. Couple more takeaways if you don't mind, Alex. I mean, I really, really believe, even though we still have question marks, I was looking at the guys that I passed on at running back for Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp, and ultimately these were the guys who were gone by the time it got to Chark and McLaurin. I was forced to go back to wide receiver. I was a little bit to see David Montgomery move into the 5th round, but I don't give a shit.
I don't want him.
I do think at 5.10, David Montgomery is a good pick, Alex. David Montgomery is a good pick at 5.10. And more importantly, I'm still very surprised to see that we have Darius Guice so high, including over David Montgomery. I mean, I know the trash man is sour on the Redskins running back situation.
I can move Darius Guice down. That's no problem. I'm actually right now, I'm going to switch Darius Guice and Kareem Hunt on this sheet, maybe, because we have not been getting enough Kareem Hunt for my taste.
I'll tell you, at 510, I want David Montgomery. I don't need to ship it. I don't want 100% exposure. And I haven't gotten all the answers I wanted from the Bears organization this year, but that backfield is devoid of talent. The fans absolutely hate Tariq Cohen as any type of offensive player. We can't trust Nagy. Hopefully we get Foles in there. There's a lot of question marks, but at 5.10, I mean, Montgomery it's a solid
5.10 or 5.01.
5.10 is where
so 5.10.
Yes.
So we're talking pick 57, or is that what we're talking? 49. Talking pick 59. So, I mean, okay. Yeah, I mean, you don't want him more than Raheem Mostert, do you?
It's probably. I mean, I think that's probably close. I might. I'd have to really think about that. I might.
You want Mark Ingram more than both those guys, right?
I mean, how can you have J.K. Dobbins? I know that Dobbins has. Look, I can't believe that there's 2 Ravens running backs with basically like round 5, round 6 ADPs that we've been seeing in recent weeks. It's impossible to think that holds up, and mostly I don't think that's an indictment of Ingram. I think it's probably fine value on Ingram still. It's more of a preposterous, ADP on Dobbins in that crowded, backfield. But there's Ingram is facing downward pressure right now. So no, I'll probably stick with Ingram, but that's probably in reality, that's probably awfully close.
With David Montgomery, and I think you're thinking of your standard sheet, man. They throw so many footballs to Tariq Cohen, and I know that we think David Montgomery can catch, and we've seen him catch, but they do not throw him the football. And PPR, he's not the kind of target that I'm interested in just having a whole lot of exposure to.
I just think 5.10 when the running back situation went the way that it went in this draft, and we're seeing upward pressure on third and fourth round guys that we're not at all interested in owning at that value, that at that price, then all of a sudden you say, well, man, that's not bad to be able to maybe save yourself a little bit at running back with a Montgomery at 5.10 versus having to go high on a Mostert or a Singletary or, any other number of these other guys that I just reeled off. I mean, like I said, like David Johnson got pushed way up. Jonathan Taylor got pushed way up. Devin Singletary got pushed way up. Raheem Mostert got pushed way up. James Conner got pushed way up. I'm looking here. The sheet does, in fact, have Chark and McLaurin over Cam Akers. So that's why I took Chark and McLaurin there at that turn.
It doesn't anymore, but right. The sheet, the 2.1 does.
And so I just think rather than having to go early on Devin Singletary or something, one of those guys, I don't mind having an option of, not mega of exposure.
What do you mean?
I don't hate Montgomery.
It feels to me like it's like going early on Devin Singletary. To me, it feels like what you're talking about, I feel like, is going early on David Montgomery. Right? Devin Singletary has the higher ADP.
Then he
has the higher ADP. The spot that you got him at 5'10" is 2 spots below what his current average draft position is right now at 57. Devin Singletary's current ADP is 44. So I don't see it as a reach.
But the other thing is the opportunity cost, because if you don't do that there and you get stuck in this situation, then you're looking to fill up on Ronald Jones, DeAndre Swift, Kareem Hunt, Kerryon Johnson. I hate that. I hate that. I'd absolutely rather get him Montgomery and then come back with another wide receiver later than get stuck with.
What about a Raheem Mostert?
Well, he's one that got pushed up too. He wasn't there. But those are the guys we're talking about. You're not totally comfortable with any of them, but if you get in a pinch, I'd rather have one of those guys as my RB2 than Ronald Jones or DeAndre Swift.
Well, nobody wants an RB2 of fucking Ronald Jones or DeAndre Swift. That should never be happening. How much higher than their ADPs can we get these guys based on one cockamamie mock draft?
That's what I said. I said you don't ever want to overcorrect, but you got to take this into consideration. David Montgomery, he should be over. I think he could live a little bit higher potential. I think ultimately this happens every year. Every single year this happens. No matter what, the running backs are going to get pushed up. Look in the sheet 60 days from now, and all these running backs are going to be pushed up the sheet. So you can fight it, but eventually the market forces your hand. I get what you're saying, and I tend to agree with most of it, but I just think we're seeing the early signs of it. I'm not saying to overreact. I'm just saying this is something to watch out for. I think they're all good discussion.
I get it, but I feel like you're locked on to David Montgomery, who is, we already have him priced in at. We have David Montgomery right now priced in at running back 26. His current ADP is running back 24, and last year in fantasy points per game, he was running back 34, right? Do you expect, are you expecting him to be a whole lot better this year? Are you expecting David Montgomery to be less shitty? Like what? Why are we locking in on David Montgomery?
Yes, I am, because there's nobody else there. I know you're looking at the PPR perspective, and I get that for this particular sheet, but I just think 5.1, they've got nobody else. I don't trust, Nagy, but I'm not sure. Hopefully Foles can improve the situation. I just think at 5.10, again, it's opportunity cost. The guys that you're left with behind him are no good. Once you're past Connor, Mostert, Montgomery, Singletary, you're in no man's land if you don't have your RB2 by then. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, here's what needs to be fixed and what needs to be addressed. There's absolutely no fucking way when you're using this sheet will you not have an RB2 by the time you get to David goddamn Montgomery. We can maybe end it there. It's probably a good decent spot to end it.
That's fine. I'll just give you this. So let's get Geis down. He's too high.
All right. I've already moved him down.
I was really shocked in this draft. This isn't from the sheet, but I was shocked from ADPs to see Kerryon Johnson go as high as he did in this simulation. I originally thought that I'd be interested in whichever Lions running back I could draft super late this year as maybe like a low-end flex, but at the price tag I'm seeing on both those guys right now, I think it's going to be a hard pass on both Lions running backs at this point, unless we see some significant downward pressure on them. And then I guess my only other nitpick is I just think having Emmanuel Sanders over Hollywood Brown is ludicrous.
That's just, well, I mean, let's look at the ADPs. Let me just pull up the ADP. I remember making that move. Let's just see. So Marquis Brown. 6, wide receiver 32. Okay. Yeah, I could definitely make that move.
Especially I got exposure to Jared Cook. I thought that was kind of sneaky.
Okay. Marquis Brown go above Will Fuller to you? Number one wide receiver for Deshaun
Those guys
Watson?
pretty much living in the same neighborhood. Maybe
Will Fuller needs to be above Tyler Boyd.
You could make the argument. I think you can sort those by ADP for now until we.
Do you like Marquise Brown better than Tyler Boyd?
Probably. Probably. I mean,
I think that's a standard.
Probably, especially since the Trashman. I do agree with the Trashman that AJ Green's ADP's gotten to the point where maybe, like he said with Keenan Allen, those are two guys the ADPs have gotten so low. I don't love their situations, but maybe you think about them. So if you're going to be doing that with AJ Green, I don't know how much Tyler Boyd you're going to be really all that interested in.
All right. Well, I got to fucking get this 2.2 all goddamn retested. Jesus Christ.
And one more question for you, Alex. What about Carson Wentz and Daniel Jones? I mean, I like those guys.
You don't love getting those guys? I love both those guys.
I like them. I was just a little bit I'm looking at the guys that are underneath them. I was, I get it. I get the argument, and I'm not going to stump real hard for it. But I was a little.
Do you think Stafford needs to come up?
Yes,
or Brady.
That's another. I've been trying to talk to you. I've been wanting to.
We get Stafford. We get Stafford in every draft, but I'll move him up.
I think Stafford is a good pick. I don't know that he needs to necessarily be over those. That's an interesting tier of quarterbacks to discuss. I was at least a tiny bit surprised to see Daniel Jones and Carson Wentz where they were.
Do you like Stafford? Do you like Brady better than Jones or Wentz?
Probably, I think. Probably so. I mean, it's none of those guys go without risk. I mean, Breeze, you might like more than them.
No.
I was surprised to go back and look at Breeze's game log last year. He had even though it was 11 games played, he was having a pretty decent season. If you projected his year out last year to 16 games, the numbers were pretty good.
There's some stuff I heard from interview with Nick Underhill where they're having to change a bunch of his routes to where his declining arm strength specifically this year. I'm just a little bit worried about Drew.
Well, I like that you brought up Stafford though, because we talked about him recently when we had the TJ Hawkinson podcast, and then we've said, you mentioned earlier, we kind of like that Galladay tier of wide receivers. And then I think the Trashman mentioned him, and another guy that I had my eye on is Marvin Jones has been a disappointing own the last few years, but his ADP is getting to the point where it's a little bit appealing. And then you start to say, well, if I'm going to be interested in all these lines, all those arrows point back to Stafford. And, Stafford's game log was actually pretty damn good last year. So,
all right.
I like that.
Well, fucking A, dude. I'm going to get to testing this thing. To everybody who's watching, thank you guys. We'll get this pod up probably later today, and it'll be up on Monday morning for everybody to listen. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could please give us a thumbs up, give us a comment there. It means a lot to us. Also, make sure and subscribe. We have content coming on YouTube, if not every day, man, close to every day during the week. So we'd appreciate getting you guys as consistent viewers. Love y'all. We will talk to you soon. Peace.